Worlders, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emma, and I want to do a quick disclaimer. If the lighting looks weird, I'm using like this ring light, and I used them in the last 3 videos that I uploaded on my channel, but it's getting kind of dark, so I have it on a different setting, so if I look washed out, that's why. Also, it's getting dark, and I want to film this and another video really quickly. I forgot my phone, and normally I would have edited that out, but I don't think I have time. So if I'm talking kind of fast, that's why. But in one of my last videos, I mentioned that I wanted to do a book talk on the last book I read, or the last new book that I read in 2019, and that was They Both Die in the End, or Both Die at the End. I always want to say In the End, I don't know why, by Adam Silveria, I think is how you say his name. So I wanted to come in and do a book talk on this. I do my book talks in an enter at your own risk kind of way. I'm not going to purposefully give away spoilers, but I might allude to things, and there might be things that you might consider a spoiler. So watch this at your own risk. If you want to take the risk and read it, go ahead. If you don't, I understand as well, but let's get started. And as always, I will have notes on my phone, so if I look down, that's why. I also am trying to get better at looking at like you guys and not at the side screen, so I apologize for that as well. So this book takes place in a dystopian version of the present. I believe it's the present. I didn't get any indications that it took place in like 50 years or anything, and a lot of there's like pop culture references that make me think it's taking place in the present or even a little bit in the past at this point. When was this book published? This was published in 2017, so around 3 years ago. None of the, let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb. None of the references in the book make the book feel dated, but like I understood them, but I'm also reading it within 3 years of it being published. But a lot of the references do make it feel like it's happening around the present, but it is a dystopian kind of story. Basically, in this dystopian world, on the day you die, you get a phone call somewhere between like 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. that morning. You don't get a lot of information. You just find out that you're gonna die in the next, on that day. So by 11:59 p.m., that's right, p.m., on that day you're gonna die. And our 2 main characters, Rufus and Mateo, get that phone call, and they decide to spend their last day together and see what life has to offer. One of them is more outgoing, and one of them is kind of an introvert and didn't really make a lot of friends and stuff like that. So you kind of had those like 2 opposites playing each other. So one of the things that I liked about this book is that it did give me a lot to think about. I would find myself thinking, like after I'd put the book down at night, if I lived in that dystopian world, actually, let's go back and just say, would I want to live in that dystopian world? And the answer to that question is no. In no way would I want to get a phone call on the day I was gonna die of someone being like, hey, you're gonna die today. But a little bit in the book, there was this idea of like, how do you tell people that you got that phone call? And would you tell people that you got that phone call? And there's a part of me that would want to think that the only thing I would do, like I don't want to think I would, I don't know if I'd want to tell people. There's a part of me that really thinks that I would call out of work, but other than that, live like a very normal day. And the only reason that I would call out of work is I work with kids. I've mentioned it a few times. I run an after-school program, so I work with kids, and I'm with kids for 90% of my day, if maybe a little bit less, maybe like 80% of my day, because I also like work in the school. So I wouldn't want, like if I knew I was gonna die, I wouldn't go to work because I wouldn't want to die in front of kids because that's so traumatic. But I don't think like I would be calling all my friends and like expecting everyone to take time off. And like in the book, they had their own funerals. So like they attended their funerals and people got to say goodbye. So maybe in that world, you don't get funerals. Like you don't like call your boss and tell them that someone died and you need to go to a funeral. You would call them and say, my friend got the DeathCast call, and go to the funeral that way. So maybe that's kind of how that works. So if that was it, I probably would go because I would want people to be able to say goodbye. But at the same time, I don't know if I would want everyone treating me differently. But it also made me think a little bit about mortality. And I thought about like, if I got that DeathCast call today, a lot of thoughts that I would have, like, I would never get to meet children that I would never have at this point, but like I've always wanted to be a parent, and like I'll never get to meet children or have children. And another thing that I was thinking about is how I would never be able to publish the books that I work on, and that's like heartbreaking to think that I've had these stories in my head for years that like I wanted to tell and no one's gonna be able to know them. So I think that although it's a really sad and depressing book, it does kind of light a fire under you because there is that mortality aspect to it, but it also makes you question things, and I really appreciated that part of the book. Like I honestly and truly liked it. I don't know if I've talked about this on here, but I've always had this idea that like in high schools, at least my high school, you had to take 4 years of English, and all 4 years were the same. Like you read a Shakespeare book every year, you would read like a bunch of classics. Maybe if you were lucky, you would get like one YA book, but there weren't a lot of them. And I almost feel like it'd be really cool if like some high schools would take like different types of genres. So like take like Brit Lit and take YA and take dystopian and take even graphic novels, and have 1 year where high schoolers take like a specified English. That is something that they would enjoy, because I think there's a lot of kids out there, or a lot of people out there. I even hear it on BookTube all the time. People are like, well, I didn't read in high school because I didn't know, and like I didn't know there would be books that I like. So I feel like more books that aren't classics in English class. And I think that this would be a really interesting book to do with like a junior or a senior class, because I think they would be able to discuss some of the stuff that does happen in this book. I just noticed that my battery is starting to run low, so we're going to move on a little quicker now. So something that I saw on Goodreads that a lot of people didn't like, but I really liked about the story, is there's all these like intertwining stories. So you read it's not from their perspective, it's like a narrator talking about other people. So Rufus and Mateo's stories are told from their point of view, but then you get mixed in a few other chapters. Like you get Mateo's best friend, you get the foster siblings that Rufus had, but you also get some like there's a journalist storyline where she, I don't want to give it away, but there's like a journalist story, and there's a couple other stories throughout the novel that intertwine, and I really liked it because it really paints that picture and that point that we all are able to influence other people's lives, and we don't even realize it. Big problem I had with this though was the characterization of a lot of characters. I felt like one of our lead characters was a very straightforward character, and he stayed the same throughout the whole novel, but then you had this other character that in my mind was very inconsistent, and sometimes was a badass, and then sometimes was like this weak kid. And I know that you would have that, but like it just was conflicting, and it was hard to read. And then for me, that actually made the romance harder to read, because I was reading it and I didn't understand what the two characters saw in each other, because I was like, this person is constantly changing on you. Like, wouldn't that drive you crazy? And this 18-year-old I'm reading is reading as a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old even in my mind. And the other character's reading as like a 16, 17-year-old. And like the characterization was hard for me to follow. So it was hard for me to get behind the romance in the story. And then I also am not a big fan of insta-love anyways. When I heard about the story and I heard about the premise and I heard that it was a male-male romance, I was very intrigued, but I was under the impression that it was like two people who kind of already knew each other both got the DeathCast call, and instead they're strangers. And I had a very hard time wrapping my head around why two people who just met, who don't really know about anything about each other and have, in my mind, very little chemistry, were interested in one another. I was not a fan of the romance in the novel, and I didn't want to root for the characters. I didn't even feel a big friendship. I kind of just felt like they were two people that maybe like they felt like work friends to me. Like, you know how like your work friends you don't necessarily have chemistry with, but you can joke around with? That's what these two characters felt like to me, and that didn't sit well. It wasn't the romance that I wanted to read. I can see where Adam Silveria was going with this. I could see their thought process, and it felt like it could have been like a good setup for like a rom-com kind of forced proximity trope, but it just didn't work for me. And I think that's my biggest complaint, and I honestly think that's why this book went from a 3-star book to a 4, or from a 4-star book to a 3-star book. But no matter what I rated it 3 stars, but no matter what, I was disappointed in it. I did have it as like a 5-star prediction. If I had made a 5-star prediction book at the beginning of 2019, this book definitely would have been on it. But alas, it didn't even make it into my top books of 2019. But yeah, I was not a huge fan. I would recommend it though. Like, it's like, I think other people would have enjoyed it, and I think maybe I was just being too picky. So I wouldn't discourage people from reading it, but I didn't really love it. But let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts were on this book if you read it, and also maybe enlighten me to things. Maybe some things that I didn't like, you guys liked. There's a reason why that I just can't see. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, Worlders. Perfect. Oh, Manifest is back. That's cool. And there's a reason why it.